Hello and good evening to tonight's meeting of the District Development Management Committee. Before we start the meeting, I'd like to ask our Democratic Services, Gary Woodall, to read the webcast announcement, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to remind everybody present that this virtual meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing or other such use by third parties. Therefore, by participating in this virtual meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. If members of the public do not wish to have their image captured, they should ensure that their video setting throughout the virtual meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Please also be aware that if technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, the chairman may need to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, members. For the webcast, I'd just like to make some introductions as to who is on the webcast. My name is Councillor Sue Jones and I am chairing tonight's meeting. My vice chairman tonight is Councillor Brian Rolfe. From the planning department, we have Andrew Marks, the service manager for development management. We have Suki Dwada, who is the case officer for one of the applications tonight. We have Kumar Hamat and Graham Courtney. We also have with us today the council's legal advisor, that's Stephen Bell. From Democratic Services, we have Gary Woodall and Vivian Messenger, and some people hiding behind the name webcaster. So that's the who of people here today. Speakers, I think Gary Woodall has explained the format of the meeting on Zoom. As always, you'll be given your normal 3 minutes. At the end of 3 minutes, we will indicate that you need to wind up. And if you can wind up your presentation within about sort of 10-15 seconds at the very most. If not, unfortunately, we'll just have to interrupt you and possibly mute your microphone. So it's much better for you to wind up yourselves and bring your presentation to a proper end. I think that covers items 1 and 2. I will be a voting chairman for this evening's meeting. Right, item 3, please. Apologies for absence. Gary?
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies tonight from Councillor Helen Kane.
Thank you. And therefore, substitute members?
Thank you, Chairman. Tonight, Councillor Richard Bassett will be substituting for Councillor Helen Kane.
Thank you. Good evening, Councillor Bassett. And item 5, members, any declarations on any items on tonight's agenda, please? Councillor Bassett.
Yeah, I should actually say one of the things on the application is talking about Epping Forest community transport under one of the headings. And I'm on the trustees of that. It's not pecuniary interest in any shape or form.
Thank you. Okay, so that's on the first item. Okay, thank you. I will try and use the blue hand indication, members. So if you can use the blue hand if you want to speak, it will make my life slightly easier. But if I miss it, please just wave at me and I'll call on you to speak. Item 6 is, as in all planning meetings, it's to note the policy briefing note about the local plan submission version and its relevance to any applications that we are discussing. So that is for noting. Councillor Heap, I see that you're indicating.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that I have had some emails with the applicant, mainly to acknowledge that I've read what he sent to us, and to ask him at one point if he was successful to save the stained glass windows that are on one of the buildings. Okay,
thank you. Okay. In that case, we move straight on to our first item of planning, and that is item 7 on our agenda. And it's the planning application EPF 271219 Nazing Glassworks Nazing. And we're passing straight over to Suki, who's going to introduce this.
Can you see my screen, Chairman?
We can indeed, Suki, thank you.
Apologies. Madam Chairman, we're going to start with the drone footage we took in November last year, if that's in order with you.
That's absolutely perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. And we can see that.
Thanks. So we've got about 11 minutes of drone footage, which I'm not going to take you through all of it. It is really impressive, high quality drone footage, and it was taken in November last year by a contractor working for us. So I'll flick ahead and just talk you through what you're seeing on screen.
Thank you.
So this, to start off, is the view sort of towards Broxbourne. So that's the road going in front of the site when you go out of Nazing towards Broxbourne over there and going over the bridge, and then with Broxbourne Station, I believe, in the background over there. So I won't talk too much, and I'll let you have a look at the pictures. The site is basically the area over there, and hopefully I'm moving my cursor not too quickly for you to see. So where that little truck is going in to the entrance, and then obviously all these buildings down here, and it includes an access area down in the corner over here, which is actually still part of the green belt. You can see quite a lot of trees on the site over there. And then I'm sure Suki will refer to it, but we've got the RV park here at the back. I'm going to scoot forward now to about 4 minutes, so just bear with me. This is the view from the roadside with Nazing here on the right-hand side as you look in Broxbourne towards the left. These two buildings, Councillor Heap may raise at some stage during the deliberations, but those are buildings that were granted planning permission in the mid-2000s. These buildings here have been there for a longer period of time. The area over here is also included in the application site, and like I said, down here, a bit of greenbelt land that's suggested to be one of the entrances to the site. And I may just point out that the buildings that you can see over there do not form part of the application site. And this is the aerial view just from the water's edge. So this is the rear edge of the application site going up to there, and then including the entrance over there. And then I'll give you one more view from the Broxbourne side. There we go, got there in the end. Little area of greenbelt over there, application site here, excluding these buildings over here, and with the residential here in the front, and the existing caravan car park at the rear. Maybe because obviously the site is referred to throughout as the Nazing Glassworks, so my understanding is that these are the buildings that actually constitute the glassworks and the factory shop, this building over here. Thank you, members. I'll keep this open in the background. I'll stop sharing the screen, but if you've got any further questions or want to see anything else, then obviously we can do that for you.
Thank you. So I think we're back to Suki.
Just sharing my screen.
That's brilliant. We can see it. Thank you.
This application is for outline permission for the demolition of all buildings and structures on the site and replacement with a mixed-use development. It will comprise of up to 5,000 square metres of floor space for employment uses, including retail, office, light industrial, healthcare and leisure, along with a maximum of 230 residential units. The formation of new pedestrian, cycle and vehicular circulation routes and means of access, new private and public open space, play space, cycles and vehicular parking. This plan shows the existing location plan. Access is off Masonry Road. The site covers an area of 2.9 hectares. This plan shows the layout for which approval is sought. 7 buildings are proposed, which range between 3 and 5 stories in height. The pink shaded blocks are 3 stories. The lilac shaded blocks are 4-story. Blue shaded blocks are 5-story. Matters for which approval is sought include access, landscaping, layout, and scale. The only matters which is reserved is the appearance of the proposal. For this reason, that the proposed building size, position, height, along with the access arrangements will not change at the discharge of condition stage. The proposed scheme will provide 960 square metres of office space, 3,025 square metres of light industrial space, 1,015 square metres of flexible retail, health and leisure floor space. The flexible floor space, A1, D1, D2, which is retail, health and leisure, are shown in aqua. The B1 industrial, B1 light industrial is shown in green, and the residential in pink. This slide shows the upper floor uses. The northern section of Block B will be office, and the remainder of the upper floors will be residential. The area containing the existing buildings is in an existing designated employment site and is allocated for employment within the submission version of the plan. The site represents 1.4% of the total employment space within the district. The site selection process also considered the site for residential in 2016, but the site was discounted due to its location within the flood zone and its separation from the settlement of Nazing. Starting point for any development which includes housing, therefore, must be to enable the protection of this existing employment space as a minimum to ensure the future employment opportunities within the district are safeguarded. Floor space rather than the number of jobs are protected, as the number of jobs cannot be properly regulated by planning policy and legislation. The loss of industrial floor space on this designated employment site would also set a precedent for other developers to do the same in other designated employment sites. I have had 2 pre-apps for sites in Epping, which also seek to replace employment space for residential. The proposal fails to provide any B2 uses. The use class category B2 allows for all industrial processes other than those in the B1 light industrial category. They include industrial processes, car repair services, catering premises, and production. B1 light industrial category is for uses which do not harm residential amenity. This slide shows a plan of the existing businesses within the Nazing Glassworks site. It's dated March 2019 and was submitted to the council as part of the applicant's pre-application inquiry. Not all the use classifications suggested in the plans are agreed with officers, in particular the Glassworks factory shop sells items which are made in the factory and is attached to the factory. It is therefore considered to be ancillary to the factory use. However, the plan does illustrate the level of occupancy within the designated employment site. With this change, the breakdown of the uses as a percentage at that time were offices 13%, light industrial 17.6%, general industrial 44.5%, retail 5%, education 10.9%. This figure includes units occupied by CK Assessments and Training Limited, which offer training in manual professions in the plumbing and gas sector. The type of training provided includes using power tools and equipment and gases necessary to learn these trades. It's therefore considered that the attractiveness of the site for this tenant was its location within an industrial estate. The gym is 5.5%. Sui generis uses are 0.2% and the vacancy rate is 1.3%. Above slide taken from the Employment Land Supply Assessment carried out in 2017. Its findings were that the site is suitable for expansion. The pink pointer indicates the entrances of the buildings. The flexible use category fails to consider the design requirements of the user. Light industrial, retail, cafe, healthcare, leisure and residential are all unique. Spaces which are designed solely with the purposes of being flexible can risk being generic and therefore potentially unsuitable for the reality of employment uses. The design differences of those various spaces include their sizing, interaction with external and public space, servicing, views into and out of buildings, security and entrances, outdoor yard requirements. This slide shows the illustrative master plan of the site. There are 4 car parking zones which provide 230 car parking spaces, 230 residential spaces, 50 commercial spaces, 44 visitor parking spaces. Car parking is the first impression at all entrances to the site, including the public right-of-way. There are almost no areas of the site which are not accessible to vehicles, including refuge tracks along the eastern boundary of the ecological corridor. The transport statement indicates that the proposal will increase vehicle trips around the Epping Forest SAC. The applicants are therefore required to agree to pay for the council to review the transport statement methodology in order for the council to be satisfied that any adverse effects in connection with the application will either not arise or, if they do, will either be appropriately mitigated through the air pollution mitigation strategy or it's identified where further mitigation measures are required. Since the applicant is unwilling to pay for the review, the council cannot demonstrate that there will be no adverse impacts as a result of the proposal in terms of air pollution around the Epping Forest SAC. The council therefore cannot grant permission. The shaded yellow area indicates the extent of the public realm on the site. The public realm encompasses 3 parking lots as well as on the avenue of parking spaces. A parking space does not equate public realm. Pocket parks are situated alongside more parking and the primary vehicular access. The primary children's play area is also accessible to the public. This is the excavation plan, which indicates the location of the underground car park in relation to the buildings. It's located beneath blocks C to G and the communal garden area. The site is located within flood zones 2 and 3. It is therefore at greatest risk of flooding. The purpose of planning is to improve the infrastructure upon which we depend for a civilized existence. By locating development outside of flood risk areas, we are reducing the probable risk of flooding. National policy requires that councils steer development towards areas where flood risk is at its lowest. In this case, whilst the flood risk assessment demonstrates that the development would be safe subject to further conditions, since the site is located in an area with the highest risk of flood, national policy requires that the proposal will also need to provide wider sustainability benefits to the community that would outweigh the location of the development within flood zone 3. It is for these reasons highlighted within the report and summarised within this presentation that officers do not think there are sufficient wider sustainability benefits for the community that would outweigh this risk. The residence units will be made up of 86 one-bedroom apartments, shown in blue, which have an internal size of 50 square metres The one shown on this slide is an illustration of one which is 56 square meters, and there are 144 two-bedroom apartments which have an internal size of 70 square meters, shown in pink. 46 of the units will be affordable. The policy requirement is 40% or 92 units. Therefore, the proposal offers half of what is policy compliant. The affordable housing units will be managed by a registered provider who will allocate to people on the Epping Forest District Council Housing Register. The rent charged is at 80% of the market rate or the local housing allowance, whichever is cheaper. The viability assessor advised, as the viability evidence submitted does not contain sensitivity testing or explore any alternative schemes, it does not comply with national planning practice guidance on viability. The council should therefore be cautious in giving it substantial weight. The application therefore fails to adequately demonstrate that this scheme is the only realistic option to enable employment uses to be re-provided on the site, and that it would therefore not be viable to provide the full requirement of 92 units required by policy H2. Furthermore, the above illustrative internal layout of the plan shows that 48% of the homes will be single aspect, and some of the units that are likely to be created will provide 4 levels of light and outlook. The top street scene shows the northwest elevation of blocks D and C. The southeast elevation of the avenue showing, so the second row is the southeast elevation showing blocks A and B. Below that is a section through the residential access road blocks A, C, and G. It doesn't, and the one below that is the street scene of the communal access road facing blocks D and B and existing neighbouring properties. The last one is the residents' parking area from neighbouring commercial blocks B and A. No cars are shown on the plan. The first section runs from the existing residential properties through the centre of the site to blocks B, D, and E. The second runs through neighbouring commercial buildings through blocks B and A. Third runs through blocks G, F, E, and D. And you can also see the underground parking. The last one is of the same buildings, but is positioned further northeast and also depicts the podium level gardens. This view is of the Bolton Lake to the site. The arrow points to block C. Upper floors of the building can be seen above the tree line. In particular, in white on this visualization, the height and visibility of the 5-story block C negatively impacts on the Lee Valley Park landscape and naturalistic setting. This view is about 200 metres southeast of the site. At the northern side of the Lambert, we're looking at the site. Looking at the southeastern corner of the site, you can see the upper floor and roofs of the proposed built forms. This is the view looking up the river. The buildings are on the right of this view. This slide shows an illustrative plan of the proposed landscaping for the main amenity area for the site. The main access is via steps. The level access is provided at the far eastern side of the site. This is not inclusive design. Raised planters will be used for privacy for the ground floor flats. Timber decking is proposed and artificial lawn, raised planters, and permeable resin bound gravel. A road runs through the ecological corridor, which is for servicing vehicles. This lack of natural soft landscaping is poor given the location of the site within the Lee Valley Regional Park. The blue line indicates, so this is the plan for the pedestrian and cycle movements. The blue line indicates the primary and secondary pedestrian routes. The yellow line indicates the primary and secondary cycling routes. No separate pedestrian access is proposed for the northwestern access. Or the basement area here, or the servicing road. This plan shows the servicing and delivering drop-off zones which will operate under restricted hours. Yellow is the vehicle movements. In yellow show the residents' vehicle movements. The light blue is for vehicles, the dark blue is for commercial, the red is for visitors and servicing vehicles, the green is for refuge and emergency vehicles. This area is also proposed for the ecological corridor. The proposal is in principle unacceptable from an officer's point of view due to the loss of employment-based residential development on a flood plan and its poor placemaking credentials. However, had the scheme been policy compliant, the applicant would have been required to provide sufficient funding to meet the infrastructure needs of the development. This is a total requirement of £4,880,411 or £21,219 per dwelling towards education, health and sustainable transport provision, along with contributions to implement the air pollution mitigation strategy. Had an appropriate assessment been carried out which confirmed that the proposal would not have an adverse impact on the integrity of the Epping Forest site. This view is of the northern access road. You can see Block D in the lower centre of the view. No separate pedestrian access has been provided for residents. This is the most direct pedestrian and cycle route to key amenities and onward travel to Boxwood Station. It shows shared surface access where commercial and service vehicles would come into conflict with anyone walking or cycling. Public right-of-way connectivity within the site and access to green spaces is via ramps behind crossing car parks. There are no sheltered, secure cycle parking for the commercial employment uses. Only Sheffield bike stands. There is also no commitment or space indicated for showers and locker facilities in the employment buildings. This is key for encouraging active commuting. This slide shows the proposed ecological recommendations for the site. The 4 green roofs are a positive feature in the scheme. However, you can see the open space on the southern section of the site. This is where the primary equipped place space is located. It sits alongside the access road and opposite the commercial parking lot. It's the only area within the whole development to kick a ball. It's detachment from the majority of the 230 residential dwelling units, provided with poor natural surveillance. The design access statement indicates that swales are proposed along the edge of the play space, which is not shown on this drawing. A swale is a shallow drainage channel with a gentle slope in the ground where water running off a site can collect and soak away. Swales can be used to channel runoff from roads and car parks where it collects into pools before soaking away. The swale may cause severance issues for the play area. The ecology report indicates that western end of this play space should be retained as rough scrub. The central area of this park will contain rough grassland. This requirement is at odds with the use of the area as a play space. No funding or agreement has been put forward for any play equipment. This plan also shows the amenity area above the basement car park as providing species-rich grassland, yet the landscape plan indicates that artificial lawn, decking, planters, pergolas and hard standing will predominate in this area. A species-rich grassland area is also proposed in the area proposed for the servicing road near the northeastern boundary of the site. The southern section of the site is within Greenbelt. This is shown by the green dashed line on this slide. Trees to be removed to make way for the road and play space are annotated in red. Hard standing for the pavement and road are proposed in this location. Also, the removal of a number of oak trees. The urbanisation of this section of the site is therefore considered inappropriate development within the green belt. Officers therefore considered the proposal fails to achieve the placemaking aspirations of the submission version local plan. There are therefore 8 reasons for refusal. These are that it fails to protect and enhance existing allocated employment space, and it is contrary to the spatial development strategy. It's not being demonstrated that the proposal will not have an adverse impact on the integrity of the Epping Forest site. The key premise to justify the housing element of this scheme was that it would enable the regeneration of the employment floor space. The proposal provides less than the existing level of commercial space, and the viability assessment provided fails to adequately demonstrate that it would be financially unviable to provide 40% of the 230 homes as affordable. Insufficient planning obligations have been provided to meet the needs of the development. The proposal will therefore add to the burden on existing infrastructure. The site is located within Flood Zone 3. The proposal has not demonstrated that it is sustainable and therefore fails the exceptions test laid out in national and local policy. The 5-storey block, which will be visible from long views within this sensitive setting, will be harmful to the character and appearance of this location. The proposal has a public realm which prioritises the car to the detriment of all other users. The development proposed within the green belt section of the site is inappropriate. Thank you, Chair. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed for that very detailed presentation. Members, we do have 3 speakers on this item. The first speaker is Sue Clark, an objector. Good evening, Sue Clark.
Good evening. Thank you.
Okay, you've got your 3. Yes, we can. You've got your 3 minutes from when you start. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sue Clark. I'm a Nasing resident and I'm very much opposed to this application along with numerous other residents. It is of some concern that a development of this size only generated 43 letters of consultation from the Epping Forest Planning Department, when at a recent DDMC meeting we heard that over 80 such letters were sent to residents in respect of a 50-bed care home for Nasing, a much smaller site. The number of homes proposed in this application is almost double the quota allocated for Nasing in the emerging local plan at 122. If approved, together with Windford developments, would give Nasing a hugely disproportionate number of homes to be absorbed into a village community. The vision for Nasing in the submission version of the plan states Nasing will retain its rural character, but the numerous blocks of flats included in this development are urban in both scale, design, density, and totally out of character with Nasing. The development would affect everyone in Lower Nasing, residents who travel daily into the nearest town of Broxbourne and Hoddesdon using the B194. This is a relatively narrow road which is routinely subject to traffic congestion and hold-ups due to necessary roadworks necessary for utilities and drainage issues. It's very unusual for temporary traffic light controls to be absent on this stretch of road, as many Nasing residents know. A development of this size and potential number of vehicles could only have a negative impact on the local amenity and already overburdened road. There is also an overly large number of parking spaces proposed at 324, which cannot be conducive to encouraging alternative modes of travel, particularly for a site that is a 10-minute walk from a mainline railway station. The application seems to be contrary to a whole raft of local and national planning policies, and with the district's emerging local plan, which proposes no new employment allocations for Nasing, with this site being one of the few providing significant employment opportunities. Additionally, the suggested measures to overcome any loss of employment floor space by the County Economic Growth Unit is not focused on or guaranteed for Nasing. Concerns have been raised about the flood risk for this site, and it's noteworthy that the Council's Contingency and Safety Officer has expressed objections due to this. I believe that the Parish Council are supporting this application on the grounds that the development will have benefits for Nasing residents, one identified as an extension to the community bus service into the Keezers area. I'm very much a supporter of the bus service and use it quite a lot, but 2 or 3 more stops added onto the route can hardly be seen as a fair exchange for the imposition of a development of this size and scale and density. At the Parish Council meeting in January 2020, when this application was considered, an unusually large number of residents were present. The official minutes from that meeting state, numerous questions and concerns were raised, in particular the following. The minutes then go on to list the very issues that I have identified this evening,
That's
making
3
the Parish
minutes.
Council support very disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Our second speaker is Councillor David Joslin from Nasing Parish Council. Good evening, Councillor Joslin. You're muted, Councillor Joslin. Councillor Joslin,
You're on mute.
Oh, that's better.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yep.
Good evening.
I don't know how it disappeared. I'll start again.
Yes, of course.
Can I start my 3 minutes again?
Of course you can.
Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the District Development Management Committee. My name is David Joslin. I'm Vice Chairman of Nasing Parish Council and also Chairman of the Planning Committee. You will be aware that Nasing Parish Council has resolved to support this application with the proviso that as it proceeds, the Council will be permitted to participate and contribute to the final design of the scheme. This came about because at all stages of the planning process to date, the developer has actively involved the Council and the local community. Consequently, when the Council reached its decision, it was in possession of full information in relation to the application. When planning inspectors are dealing with an appeal, they always carry out a site visit to enable them to have a clear understanding of the issues. Bearing in mind the importance of this application, I trust and assume that all members of this committee have visited the site. Accordingly, you will appreciate that the impression of the site portrayed by the officers, and indeed in the photographs that we've seen and the video, that it will remain commercially viable in the future is not correct. In fact, when you're on the ground, the site is seriously run down and in decline. I would refer you to paragraphs 9.30 to 9.33 of the report. You will note that in January 2021, an appraisal undertaken by Lambert Smith Hampton was submitted to the Council. This shows that by the expiration of 10 years, the buildings will have deteriorated to such an extent that redevelopment will be the only option. The findings of this proposal are not disputed by officers, paragraph 9.33, and that's very important. Assuming, as I sincerely hope is the case, you have all yourselves visited the site and viewed its state and condition, no doubt you will agree with the submitted appraisal. If permission is granted for the proposed development, it will secure the viability of the site long into the future. Nasing Parish Council has noted that no objections to the proposed development were received from the statutory consultees. In particular, I would remind you that the site is within the Lee Valley Regional Park area, paragraph 2.6, who have not objected, which arguably shows the quality of the proposed scheme. The site is very much nearer to Broxbourne than to Nasing. Indeed, the address on the agenda refers to it as being in Broxbourne. It is therefore interesting to note that no response has been received from either Hertfordshire County Council or Broxbourne Borough Council. This could mean that silence implies consent. Finally, may I remind you that as the tier of local government closest to their communities, parish and town councils are well placed to know where and how local services can be situated to provide the greatest benefits for local people. I therefore hope and trust that you will approve this application and grant consent. Apart from enhancing the Nazing area,
3 minutes are well and truly up. They went about 30 seconds ago.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see an indication. Sorry, I missed that. Sorry. If you can, literally wind up within 5 seconds, please.
One sentence. Apart from enhancing the Nazing area, this will provide a huge number of benefits to the community as outlined in the report.
Thank you very much indeed.
I'm sorry, I overshot the time.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't see an indication. My apologies. Thank you. Okay, and our third speaker is Richard Collins, the applicant's agent. Good evening, Mr. Collins.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Richard Collins, and I'm one of the principal members of the applicant team seeking to deliver this site. We first engaged with the council in pre-app discussions in April 2018. We entered into a PPA, and there was an extensive series of pre-application meetings. In August 2019, despite acknowledging the huge benefits that a mixed-use scheme could deliver to the local community, officers refused to engage in any further pre-app meetings. Officers took the position that given the site as a designated employment site, the retention of the existing floor space was the top priority, a bold statement for an authority that is within the worst 3% of housing delivery in England. In the final written pre-app response, officers made it clear that if any less than full reprovision was to be accepted, robust justification would need to be provided. Despite us seeking further pre-app engagement on this key issue, officers denied us this opportunity. We continued to engage very positively with local stakeholders, and in December 19, we were forced to submit an outline planning application in an attempt to restart a constructive dialogue. We've always acknowledged the important contribution the site has made to the district in terms of local employment, evidenced by the proposed 5,000 square metres of employment space that we are proposing to deliver. However, there are clear locational, building condition and viability issues that mean full employment reprovision is simply not feasible. Extensive justification for the proposed level of floor space has been provided. Disappointingly, over the course of 17 months that the application has been live, officers have not once engaged us in this fundamental issue. Furthermore, much of our evidence has simply been ignored by officers, and this is reflected in the committee report, which is therefore misleading to members. There are a number of fundamental elements that members need to understand with regards to employment provision issues. One, the buildings have come to the end of their natural life, and therefore refurbishment of the building is not viable or efficient long-term use of this important brownfield site. Two, we've demonstrated to officers that it is not viable to bring the site forward on the basis of a like-for-like employment reprovision. Due to the constraints of the site, there is a limit on the quantum of development that can be delivered. Therefore, to allow a viable development to come forward, a balance must be struck between the enabling residential and employment component and other factors such as car parking. Fundamental to establishing what this balance mix is, and importantly, what can actually be delivered, is the financial viability of the development. This brings me on to the key issue which has prevented any progress with officers over the last 3 years. Officers have refused to engage with us on the issue of viability, and have actively prevented any dialogue with a third-party viability consultant. The consultancy team have many years' experience in working proactively with council to agree viability positions. Not one member of the team has ever been in a position where a council has refused to allow any dialogue with a third-party viability consultant. Without this dialogue, it has denied us the opportunity to discuss affordable housing provision and the level of proposed Section 106 contributions. If the planning committee wants to see this vital site regenerated, which would include an extensive list of benefits to the local community, a balanced approach to the quantum of type of employment users must be taken by officers. Notably, we have the support of the Parish Council, Lee Valley, local community groups, Essex County Council, the Environment Agency, Epping Forest Environmental Protection and Drainage, Epping Forest Ecology, the Right Honourable Robert Halford MP, and a number of existing tenants who want to occupy space within the future development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right, members, we have a recommendation in front of us to refuse planning permission. And Councillor Heap, I can see that you've indicated to speak.
Well, I'd probably like to speak twice, maybe 3 times. But initially, could we get the legal advice on if the applicant is saying that the application has been slowed down or is in any way doctrinal in its objection? Can we have a ruling on that or advice on that?
I'm not aware of any such suggestion, and the officer's report is as stated, and I have seen the officer's report and approved the officer's report.
We have had, from the applicant, we've had emails saying that some of the independent assessors of all the various bits and pieces have been advised not to engage with the applicant. So is that true?
Does someone want to take that?
Yeah, no, I can take that
Thank
point
you.
because we actually had an FOI on that, and our position is that we instructed a viability consultant to advise us. We did not instruct our viability consultant not to engage with the applicant, but we also didn't instruct him to engage with the applicant. That's the simple and straightforward position.
So does that mean the same thing? Sorry, that effectively means the same thing. Either you can talk to him or you can't talk to him.
No, with respect, Councillor, it's not the same thing.
If you can listen to the response, Councillor Heap.
The allegation is that we instructed our consultant not to engage. That is not the case. The way in which these types of applications usually go is that the applicant has got a responsibility to, if they want to make a viability case, submit details to us. Planning officers right across the nation do not usually have the expertise. It's a very, very detailed and expertise field. And we therefore, like lots of other councils, appoint consultants to give us advice. In this instance, the person giving us the advice is the same company who has been giving us advice for years on the local plan. So they are very knowledgeable and known to us. And what happens typically is a report is submitted to us, and like with all the other consultation responses, we get that back, and based on that response, we then produce the report, which is what happened in this case. If, like recently happened with other appeal proceedings, there's a refusal, then there's a second stage that's entered for viability, but we're not at that stage at this point in time.
Thank you.
Can I say?
Yeah.
Well, the applicant sent emails around to everybody, which did indicate that the consultants, the outside consultants, had been specifically asked not to engage with the applicant, which is different to not engage. So we need to have a thing on that.
Sorry, I thought I answered that question.
Yes.
No, you didn't quite. You said that you didn't instruct them to engage or not engage, but that's not quite the same thing.
No, but they are employed to report back to the council. That is their role.
But the applicant is claiming that they have been denied access to those consultants.
They wouldn't know.
Our officers have said that is not the case. It's up to you to choose whether you believe an email from an applicant or a verbal statement from our officer.
Thank you.
I'll let other members speak and then I'll come back if I may.
Okay, Councillor Chris Pond, you've indicated.
Yes, Madam. Can you hear me, Madam Chairman?
I can indeed.
Good. I'm using an unfamiliar computer tonight, so bear with me if it goes slightly wrong.
Of course.
Now, the Parish Council Vice Chairman asked whether members knew this site. Of course, we could not do a formal site visit, but I do know this site very well, and I also knew the regenerative aspects of the Lee Valley over the 10 or 15 years after it was declared a regional park. And the regeneration since that time has been tremendous. And very often developments such as the one we're considering tonight have formed a part up and down the Lee Valley from Bromley by Bow out to Hertford, have formed an aspect of this. So in a sense, I think this is undoubtedly an application which, if granted, would neaten up the site, which would regularize an irregular and jumbled pre-act industrial site, and would, if I were the chairman of Nosing Parish Council, I too, I think, would think that this was a good idea. But Madam Chairman, you will sense a but coming, and the but is quite an important but in my view, and that is that this site is allocated purely for employment uses in the emerging local plan, as it was, I think, in the 2016 Regulation 18 plan. And it has been a factor of the local plan process ever since 2015 that Epping Forest has declined to put in a mechanism for the conversion and adaptation of employment sites for residential or part residential use. Some other councils have not done that. As you may know, Madam Chairman, I was attending a planning inquiry for most of the last fortnight. This was an element of that. And for that reason, I've been reading some of the local plans, emerging local plans of other authorities. And I've noticed that some, where there is a surplus of employment land, have declared that a policy whereby conversion to residential or part conversion to residential might be in prospect. Epping Forest have not done that. And I'm presuming the reason they have not done that is that their employment land is at a premium in this district. Employment within Epping Forest is very often commuting, which by its nature is unsustainable. And therefore, local employment sites have become important. And what is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, because in the Regulation 18 submission, Loughton Town Council made an official submission that part of the Debden industrial estate should be redesignated for residential uses. Now, this was something which planning officers said was quite impossible with the current drafting of the local plan. So what is true in one part of the district must, I fear, be true in another part. And although I quite understand that this site in Nazing does Nazing little credit and looks tatty and could do the tidy up, I have to say I fear I agree with the officers that what is proposed is unacceptable within the terms of our local plan, and of course all decisions must be plan based. And for that reason I concur with the recommendations the officers made.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pond. Councillor Bassett.
Thank you very much. As you're aware, this application is actually in my ward. It's been with the planning department for about 2.5 years in total, from pre-application to this stage where current outline application. And I think it's important that we appreciate it's still only an outline application and can be heavily amended before any full application is submitted to meet these officer requirements. During this time, I have been party to many of the exchanges between the applicant and the officers concerned. And I've had to get involved in a couple of occasions to try to progress what was happening, as I was concerned about the lack of engagement that was going on, and hence the ability to reach any sort of agreement. But I don't want to go back over that. I'm looking at the reasons for objection. The first reason, reduction in the employment side. If you actually go to the site, you will see that a majority of it is the old glasswork furnaces. And I think they've got 47% of the existing site, which only employs 21 people. And if anyone wants to redevelop those, when you work out they've been working with lead glass and various other chemicals, the contamination on that site's going to be incredible. And I dread to think of the costs that will be involved in trying to do a straight, shall we say, upgrade on that site, which will make it not viable in my mind. And hence they try to come up with something where they can create more housing, they can create more employment, and that's individual employment. Yes, I agree the full floor space has gone down a bit, but that's one of the things that happens. It's a trade-off. And if you look at the site at the moment, if you go back to 2017, its condition at those was declared as fair. And that is 4 years ago. And to my mind, it has just fallen apart since then. I use the vet there and other things there. and you see the state of the buildings, they are very poor indeed now. With regards to the SAC, I thought this could be done with conditions, as it's only an outline application, so you can't tell exactly what the SAC would want at this stage. They've agreed that anything that we want, they would gladly pay, the amount per house, etc. Also, they've been out there and working with Lee Valley Regional Park very proactively and have reached agreements with them on some of the development and some of the things they will do for the park to create a more open environment at the back. And as Councillor Pond said, you know, it really could do with a clear up. It's a bit of a mess around there, shall we say. But I really do get confused about this concept of the viability assessment, because we have two viability assessment people, both coming up with, should we say, points of view which don't tie up. And I would have thought they would have started from the same point. And why we should not proactively say, well, you two talk to each other and work out why we have differences and work out what the real situation is here. I thought that would be much more sensible than just going, I say this, you say that, and no one will ever agree. And I know you said we didn't say go talk to them, but we didn't say you can't talk to them. I think we should have actively said, in this situation where there is so much conflict and it is a key point, we should have arranged for them to talk to each other in some shape or form. And also, when you move on to flood risk here, I should point out that the applicant has actually passed the sequential flood risk assessment. And as part of these flood zones, if you make the ground floor employment zones and everything else, then they also are acceptable. Now, the section 106, as we could see from the application, they have reached agreement with so many areas from Essex to highways to Lee Valley Regional Parks, looking for community benefits all the way along. They have been very open and honest and engaging with all of the external agencies. And consequently, as we can see, none of the external consultees have raised objections. They have all said, yep, we understand what the application is. All the objections have come from internal EFDC people. And I would have thought that we could, by some shape or form, started negotiating as to what's acceptable, what is the red line, what can we do to alter this? Because this is an important application. It helps solve our housing problems, or some of them, and it also helps some of our employment issues, which at the moment, you know, we're trying to find space. But we can also say we've got Harlow just on the border of that, and they are crying out for people to work there, and also their special areas there. They mentioned visual intrusion, and I get that's just a design thing. You can work out you don't want it 4 floors, we'll make it 3, and we'll work out how that can be done. And then they mentioned hard surfacing. Well, it's very hard surface now, so therefore there's lots of things can be done there to help with drainage and everything else. And I can understand why residents are concerned, because it's 200 houses. It's in a place which is sustainable because it's right near Broxbourne, and they've got the shops there, they've got the stations there and buses there. But similarly, it's also got support from quite a few residents as well, as they think it's a good thing, and they agree that something wrong could happen at that site at any time, and God knows what we'll end up with then. And I noticed in here where we started talking about what they can do under permitted development. And that also worries me, because there was all talk about September 2020 and the application coming in before that date. But they could then reapply with a piecemeal development of here and there as to what they could do under permitted development. And we lose all of the community benefits from this. And of course, we have already got support, as you can see, from the parish council, the local MP, and many others. So I think what we need to do here is actually review what the application is, and officers and the applicant, in some shape or form, work out what would be acceptable and come to us with an acceptable joint proposal for this site that meets everyone's needs, and not just black and white, because I can see this one we turn it down, what happens then? Do we go to appeal? Do we what? And the only people that lose out then will be the residents of Nazing, who are going to be the people that end up with whatever, should we say, happens there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the planning officers might want to come back on a couple of points you've made. No, but can I just clarify one thing? You said several times, and this is really for Andrew, I think. Councillor Bassett's mentioned several times that it's only an outline application and therefore loads of changes can be made. I wasn't under that impression. I know it's an outline planning application, but I thought that actually basically the only things that can be varied was literally the appearance and not an awful lot else. Could you just clarify for me and I'm sure other members
Yes, that's correct.
the situation? Thank you.
No, that's 100% correct, Madam Chairman.
Right. So it is literally only the finishes that can be changed.
It's only the appearance, and that would include things like materials, windows, what it looks like,
and the layouts of the buildings, how the position will be, but the heights and everything else could change.
No, they can't.
The position and the layout are part of the outline application, and the height. I think it might be helpful if I just go and get my slides to show.
Thank you, Suki.
Yeah. So the plans where I haven't shown it as illustrative are what will be the approved drawings if members decide to approve. So this is what will in effect be approved. This is the ground floor uses.
You just share your screen, Suki, with us, please.
Oh, sorry.
That's lovely. Okay, thank you.
So right. So this is the layout which is being approved. These are the uses that are being approved. And if I just go to, and these are the heights that are being approved. Since it doesn't have the word illustrative in front of it, it cannot change.
Thank you.
If I stop sharing this.
Thank you. So effectively, if we did grant permission for this today, the 5-story element of it would not be changed.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. So sorry, Madam Chairman. Maybe perhaps if I can just read the information directly from the planning portal that describes each one of these reserved matters, and what it says on appearance is aspects of a building or place which affect the way it looks, including the exterior of the development. So that's clearly very, very limited. Whereas if you look at the other descriptions of scale and layout, for instance, it says includes building routes and open spaces and the way they are laid out in relation to buildings and spaces outside the development for scale, includes information on the size of the development, including the height, width, and length. So really we're looking at very, very limited appearance only. So materials, size of windows, things like that.
Right. Okay. All right. Planning officers, do you want to come back on any other points on? No, brilliant.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Yes, maybe just one or 2 points there. I think in terms of the viability, like I said before, we took expert advice, and that expert advice was published on our website on, I believe, the 27th or 26th of November, just before we called off the previous DDMC meeting that was going to deal with this application. So we determine applications based on the information submitted to us. The planning application process is not generally or usually a negotiation or a drawn-out negotiation process. That's what the pre-application and other proceedings and procedures are there for applicants to use. It's not appropriate, in fact, for the development management team, because we don't make the plan, we implement the policies in it to co-design with applicants projects to come forward. And then perhaps just on a last point, and I think Councillor or one of the other members previously mentioned it, is that we have to look at the plan and where it's at the moment and where we want to get to. So this plan is supposed to last us until 2033. So it might be that some sites come forward sooner rather than later, and we have to look at them each on their own merits in accordance with the policies that have come forward as part of the plan that we're hopefully going to adopt in early autumn. So for this site, it's clear that the ambition has always been for an employment site. It did not make it past the first or second hurdle for allocation for residential development. I hope members will forgive me, and I think the applicant will agree that I don't think we've ever said that there's a complete principal objection against some residential development on this site if it enables appropriate employment uses to come forward. We consider the scheme is not such a scheme.
Thank you. Okay. I know, Councillor Heap, you want to come back on a second time, but if I can actually ask people to speak who haven't spoken yet, and then I'll come back to you. So, Councillor John Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I have to pick up some of the things that have been said already. It's worth noting, for example, that the hearing sessions for our local plan were actually in early 2019. The site was in as a employment allocation within the local plan, perfectly acceptable for landowners and objectors, etc., to come and to those hearing sessions and persuade the inspector of the validity of making this residential as well as employment site. But that wasn't done in a way that convinced the inspector. It's not something that's part of the work towards main modifications. So I think we have to take that on board in terms of assessing this application. This has been looked at in detail already in terms of what we're doing. I was interested to hear that Councillor Bassett was saying that the developers would do whatever was needed. And we can already see that that's not the case, because the amount of money allocated in Section 106 is way short of what is required. And that was called out very helpfully in a table. I can't actually find which page it was on, but it was called out very helpfully in a table in this report that we've got, which is a very extensive report. And that shows a significant shortfall in what's required. Viability primarily is supposed to be done at the plan making time these days. And that was a very helpful briefing that we actually had as district councillors as part of the work that we did on the local plan, showing where and how that viability assessment works. Clearly, we have a need in the district for affordable housing, and therefore one of the last things that we should be thinking of getting rid of is our 40% affordability criteria. I take on Councillor Pond's point about treating Nasing the same as was treated in Loughton. I think that is very important to remain consistent. I think as well that we need to think about what we're doing here in relation to our local plan, which will hopefully shortly be coming to main modification. Again, very clear that this is something that's been allocated for an employment site. We allocated employment sites and new employment sites because, unlike some other districts, we did not have a surplus of employment land. We actually had a shortfall, hence the reason for not going for converting any of them to residential. There are a lot of good reasons in this report why we should not be giving planning approval for this. I was very grateful to Mr. Marks to hear that he agrees, or I agree with his interpretation, that an outline planning application covers everything that's in that application with only the various things excluded. Councillor Bassett, who seemed to be in favour of taking this forward, made a number of statements about things that could be changed. Well, they can't be changed if we approve this application. I don't think that there is anything in here that moves this from a very clear recommendation from the officers, which I fully agree with, to move it towards even considering granting it. And I think we should be very clear that we have a local plan. We should be following that local plan. This goes against almost everything in that local plan, and we should not be granting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, what I've heard, I think, from some members and some representations is something's to be done about this site. This is something, therefore we should do this. And I don't think that's sufficient, to justify the grant of a planning application of this scale. I mean, there are sort of two strands, if you like. I mean, there's the argument of principle about, should it be preserved as exclusively employment land? To what extent is mixed use development acceptable? And if mixed use development is acceptable, how do you justify or how do you work out the fact that the residential enables employment use? And, I can see there's a difference of view there between the applicant and the officers. I tend to think the officers got it right on this one. But even if that is not the case, and even if the applicants do have that argument right, we have a responsibility to ensure that everything that is built meets the standards of our policy and provides good living conditions and good quality of accommodation for the people who are going to live there in the long term. Once you build a development like this, it is there for the long term. And I do think that the report does set out in terms of the layout of the site, the living conditions of the residents, the layout of the flats and so forth, reasons why, even if in policy terms it was acceptable, the detail is not adequate to meet our policies. And alongside that, you've got the issues of Section 106 and the affordable housing and so forth. So I think there are strong reasons for refusal for this application. They may well not apply to a different application, as Councillor Bassett suggests, but for this application, I think the reasons for refusal are justified and members should vote accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehouse. Councillor Jeannie Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd be quite interested to know just how many people in this meeting tonight have actually ever been and seen this site. It is run down. I personally don't have a lot of faith in the so-called experts because having worked in the city with all these letters after their name, was so clueless when it actually came down to doing the manual work. So I just don't have a lot of faith in some qualifications. But just how many people have actually been and had a look and know anything about what's really needed and what the local people want? So I know in the local plan, all of the Waltham Abbey councillors voted for one thing and it was completely ignored, and something completely different there. So I can't really say whether I or the other. I was under the impression all these 17 years that when it was an outline planning permission, all sorts of things could be changed. So we've obviously never been told the right thing, because you're saying now once there's an outline permission, nothing can be changed. Now, after 17 years of being a councillor, actually not told the right way things are run. So I'm not really very happy about this. So I'm sorry to say.
Okay, thank you. Right, I think everyone's had a chance to speak first, so back to Councillor Heap.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yep.
We can indeed.
Well, it is tricky. I mean, there are some big issues here, but what's going to happen to this site without this development? Will anybody invest in it? Unlikely. You're going to spend an awful lot of money getting nowhere with this. And the officers say that there is 95% occupancy. Well, that's not really true in many ways. If one is a vet, that's not really the light industrial use that we're expecting from this site. What is, and I've asked the question, and I'm sure members have read the questions that I've sent to the officers, what is the actual percentage of occupancy on all of these sites for light residential, say, and not that's a vet or a gym? Because they are totally different things. And I think that the developer is offering something that is better. And I did point out to the officers that I worked at the Opera House, the Royal Opera House in Thurrock, and they had live-work units, and they weren't all just live-work units. They were accommodation with some industrial use underneath. And they were very, very popular and very, very good. And this could be the same kind of thing. And if we look about who's going to invest into this area long term, is it going to be an industrial area? No, it's not. If you want to do something substantial in that place, you need big space. And these are not big spaces in themselves. And they're very, very substandard. They are an ecological nightmare. They're full of asbestos for a start. They're difficult to heat. They're difficult to cool. And whoever comes in there is going to need lots of deliveries. So if it were, for example, an outlet unit for IKEA or one of those kind of things, then that's going to require lots of deliveries and lots of takeaways from it. If it's a carpet warehouse, similar thing. So it's not a great site for whatever it is. And that's a big problem with this thing because it's right near Broxbourne Station, which, let's be honest, is a brutalist marvel of a piece of architecture. Just a big cry out for that thing. So anybody living there will walk there, cycle there, and they can get there via the canal, not necessarily via the roads. 50 minutes tops walk. I've done it, and I've got a heart condition. So I know this to be true. I think we're missing an opportunity here, and I think it's a doctrinal refusal more than it is an actual sensible refusal for what's going to happen in this area. And one of the questions that the officers have not answered on the list that I sent them, and they've sent back to everybody here, was that in the Green Infrastructure Plan, there were 21 homes planned for somewhere in Nazing, and they didn't need any kind of SANG or anything like that because all of the evidence suggested that anybody there would go to the Lee Valley Recreational Park, not Epping Forest. And this is right near the Lee Valley Recreational Park. So I think we could be missing a good thing here. And I'm not convinced by any of the officers' answers on any of the matters, to be quite honest. I'm not fully persuaded, and I am listening to the other councillors, particularly Councillor Pond, I think has a very good point on it. But so does Councillor Bassett. I think he might have read everything I've asked him.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Heather Brady.
Thank you, Chairman. I will try and be very brief here. Really, I just want to support what Councillor John Phillips said and what Councillor Whitehouse said and what the officers have said. We planned a local plan with very good reasons behind everything. There were reasons behind which areas were to be industrial. There were reasons behind which areas were better for people to live in. We have employed experts to advise us on all these areas. The experts have come up with a large number of points, as have the planning officers. Obviously, the people who want to go against them tonight and who feel, that it should be houses instead are putting their points to the front, obviously, to make their argument sound sensible and good. But we must not forget all the very, very good points for not suddenly changing it from a light industrial site to a housing site. I'm not going to go through all of those now, but transport links, even links on foot, are very dodgy, very dicey from this site. Flooding, there's a variety of things which I'm not going into because if people have read what was written about it, should be familiar with the arguments from both sides. But we have a local plan for a good reason. We all contributed towards it. We employ experts, advisors for a very good reason, and we should listen to those experts. It's very easy to put your heart on your sleeve and think it's a pretty place for housing, but I think there are a lot of good reasons to stick with the officer's advice, and that's really all I'm going to say, and just to be short and sweet on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brady. Councillor John Phillip.
Thank you for letting me come back, Chairman. I will try and follow Councillor Brady's example and be short. Couple of things I wanted to say. Coming back to local plan, yes, to an extent, this is doctrinal because we're doing a planning decision. A planning decision is controlled by the legislation and the plans that are in place. That's what we do. We assess the applications against those things we are required to assess them against. And if assessing them against the things you're required to assess them against is doctrinal rather than going with your gut feel, then that's what we should do. It doesn't mean that an application that comes forward that has a number of dwellings in it as well as the industrial provision would not be successful. That may well be the case, but it's not this one. I think we also have to remember that in the local plan, Nazing was getting 120 odd dwellings. This is another 250, and I'll say it again, another 250. Passing this will not remove any of the other allocations in Nazing. I don't think we'd be doing Nazing a justice by putting this one through, given how many different things are against it. I would not be averse to seeing something else coming back that is a better solution to what we're doing, providing the policy compliant things that we need and getting to a situation where we have something that improves this area. But quite frankly, from my point of view, it's not this one.
Thank you. Councillor Heap, I can see you frantically waving. Councillor Heap. I think I'd better tell you you're muted.
Because the Heap is much more understandable.
Thank you, Councillor Phillip.
I did tell you eventually.
Thank you. It's not the it's not the number of dwellings that I'm interested in. Particularly, it's not the fact that maybe we need to share out the burden that is going to be the 11,500 homes whenever it happens. It's the fact that I have rented units like this, which I said in the second briefing that we had about this issue. I've rented things like this, and why would I ever want to rent one of these? I would never want to rent one of these because the traffic situation is a nightmare. What I do, which is I would be appealed. It's appealing to go to this thing because it's incredibly cheap. So for what I did, it's right next to a station, so I can get people out to come and see me. There are many, many benefits from it. But if I were going to do what I did, which was then fill up a lorry and put it out on the road, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. So you've got to look at the whole situation and think, would anybody want to actually invest in an area where it's trouble to get materials to it, it's trouble to get product away from it? No. But this offers an opportunity, and I'm not convinced about it yet, but this presents an opportunity where you could have small craft-like things or tiny manufacturing kind of things or bespoke manufacturing things like metalworking, tiny metalworking. And there's a big market in it. It's not entirely frivolous, what I'm saying, which could be good. But anybody else who's coming into this area as a manufacturer or an employer, it's going to be a lot of traffic coming into this. Whatever happens, it's going to be a lot of traffic if we stick to it just as an employment zone. And who would invest in it? Why would you invest in this place? There's no way you would invest in this place if you're just going to rebuild those units. Never in a million years.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Heap. Right, is there any other comments from any other members or any other planning officers? Right, in that case, members, I propose that I'm intending to go straight to the vote. If I can remind members, please, for the webcast delay, if you can just repeat your name and how you're voting. We have a recommendation to refuse planning permission based on the reasons starting on page 7 going through to the top of page 10, and you're voting either for the recommendation to refuse, against the recommendation to refuse, or abstaining. Okay, thank you. Is it Gary, are you reading the list out for us?
Yes, it is I.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we shall start, please, with Councillor Brady.
Councillor Brady, for recommendation to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Dorrell.
Councillor Dorrell, for the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Hadley.
Councillor Hadley, against the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Heap.
It's against.
Councillor Kaufmann.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Lee.
Councillor Lee against.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Against. Councillor Morgan.
Against the recommendation to refuse, yeah?
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
That's correct.
Councillor Phillip, sorry.
Councillor Phillip, for the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Pond.
Councillor Pond, for refusal.
Councillor Roberts.
Councillor Roberts, for refusal.
Councillor Sherburnia. You're muted, Councillor.
Sorry, Councillor Joe Sherburnia for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehouse.
Councillor Whitehouse for the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Bassett.
Councillor Bassett against.
Councillor Rolfe.
Councillor Rolfe for refusal.
And finally, Councillor Jones.
Councillor Jones for the recommendation to refuse.
Thank you, Chairman. In that case, the result is 10 votes in favour of the officer recommendation to refuse and 5 votes against. So the officer recommendation to refuse planning permission for the reasons stated in the report is carried.
Thank you. Members, just to reiterate that planning application has been refused. Okay, members, thank you. Right, are we happy to move straight on, or considering the time, would anybody, are we happy to move straight on to the last item?
Yes.
Yep, lovely, thank you. Okay, in that case, members, if we can turn to page 75 of our agenda. And this is to release the planning permissions that have already previously been granted by subcommittees. And we are now looking at this being granted subject to planning conditions, contributions or mitigating measures in respect of recreational visitor pressure and air quality impacts within the Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation. I think, Andrew, you're taking this, aren't you?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. We've got Juma, our planning consultant, that will take us through it. There's no presentation as such because members have had the list. So I think Juma will just talk us through. There is one point on the agenda that Juma will mention, and then I'm sure Councillor Pond has got 1 or 2 questions or comments as well. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So Juma, thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Thank you, and members. Good evening. Second item, obviously, on this evening's agenda relates to the first sequence of held in abeyance SAC applications. These are obviously noted in Appendix A. Before I just give a very brief overview, summary of the content of that, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, having read the report. Is there are 2 updates to bring to your attention following the publication. In no particular order, I raise these. The first update relates to a late third-party representation received in respect to the third item shown at Appendix A. This is, just for the record, so that everyone's familiar, is reference EPF/0826/18. That is 48 Russells Road, Buckhurst Hill, IG 95QE. The development was for a demolition of bungalow and erection of 3 flats. The representation basically cited that there were changes, or there were materials changes. There were changes to material circumstances in since the council's resolution to grant planning permission here. Officers are currently investigating the merits of that representation, and therefore recommend this evening that particular application is omitted from the list for consideration. So that's the first update. The second update being as detailed in a report published, an update from the results of obviously our consultation with Natural England. We have carried out for every single of each of all the items noted, a 21-day consultation as per as required, obviously under the Habitats Regulations 2017. We have received 10 responses. The responses essentially are identical in every respect. Those are essentially citing no further comment, but subject to allowing the council to obviously observe its standing advice in respect to the protection of protected species, woodlands and trees. As I say, we've only received 10 responses to date. The actual 21-day consultation period expired on the 22nd of April itself, and we've had no further comments since then. So those are the two updates. Moving on swiftly, well, for all intents and purposes, really the report itself is effectively not asking members to reconsider or redetermine each of those applications at Appendix A, but principally really to focus on the clarification of outstanding administrative and legal matters, which obviously need to be resolved before we can further progress, releasing the respective decisions for those applications. The recommendations are quite clear. I won't repeat those, and I'm sure you're all familiar with those. But just ask obviously the members to note the contents of the report and obviously the recommendations. I'll leave it there. That's really the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Right, members, Councillor Pons, you've indicated.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, Madam Chairman, I'd like to move that applications 1257 of 19 and 0287 of 18 be omitted from the list of permissions to be released. And I do that on the same basis that Suki Dadwar said in her presentation to the nosing item, is that the council cannot be sure that release of these permissions would not have a deleterious effect on the Epping Forest SAC. And the reason I give for that is that, in my view, the interim air quality mitigation strategy is perfectly acceptable in relation to some of the sites which are remote from the forest and of which any deleterious effect would be de minimis if at all. But these two sites, 1257 and 0287, are very close to the forest, and the one which is at 51 High Road, Loughton, is very, very close to the forest, and a very large proportion of the extra car journeys engendered by converting one house into effectively 5 would be through the SAC itself on Buckhurst Hill. And so I fear, Madam Chairman, that you cannot, in my view, release those planning permissions without transgressing the central part of the Holohan judgment of the ECJ, which governs these issues, which is that the local planning authority must be certain that no detriment will be suffered, and they cannot lawfully, in my view, act otherwise. And so that is my motion, and if anyone other member would second it, I would like that put to the meeting. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask for a seconder, just to go through it, we're not actually agreeing for it to be released. We are agreeing for the 3 things that are actually stated on page 75, which may indeed lead to it them being released. But at this stage, we are actually only agreeing to those 3 courses of action. Just to clarify that for members, I'm sure you're aware.
Madam Chairman, if that is the case, what other recourse would this release lie entirely in the hands of officers, or would there be a further hearing at DDC?
I think it would then be released by officers, but I'm sure somebody can confirm that. Andrew?
Yes, that's correct, Madam Chair. Perhaps just to clarify, because Councillor Bond and myself did, and the project officer did exchange some correspondence about this, and we did ask for legal advice from the QC that assisted us with the SAC cases. So the advice is that the air quality mitigation strategy catches all the development. And apologies, Councillor Pond, if I'm repeating this, but other members may not have seen the correspondence. But the air quality mitigation strategy encompasses all development in combination and separately. So whether that development is next to the forest or in the forest or far away from the forest, it's a strategy as a whole. And that is the advice that we've been given is the correct interpretation. I know that councillors may feel uncomfortable because these two sites referred to are right next to the forest, but the traffic counts and the traffic modelling that was done both when the initial traffic counts were undertaken in 2017, as well as the traffic counts undertaken, I think, in October 2019 or thereabouts, that actually include obviously the modelling for specific sites and areas, and the air quality mitigation strategy actually allows for that. So we are confident that we are approaching this correctly. We understand members' concern, but obviously that's up to members to debate and decide whether they want to take those cases out of the list or not.
Okay, thank you.
I do confirm that correspondence took place. And I'm afraid, Madam Chairman, I don't accept that advice because it seems to me a matter of common sense that the development of a site very close to or within the SAC is going to have a more deleterious effect than 4 miles away. As I said, most of the permissions listed, in my view, are uncontentious, but these two I would wish to have excluded, and I.
Sorry, Councillor Pond, you've muted yourself.
Well, that's very naughty of me. I believe that Councillor Heap would have wished Russell Road, Buckets Hill also to be excluded, but that has been agreed by the officers. So again, I say, if I can find a seconder, I would move that those be removed.
Okay, I can see that Councillor Heap is indicating, so I'll just go. If I could just listen to other councillors generally before we decide, but I will come back to the proposal to exclude those two that you have. I'm also quite happy to take those separately rather than take them all en masse as well. So we can, if we can hear other comments before we come back to your proposal to exclude those two, I would appreciate it. So have we got any other comments? Councillor Morgan?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a query with for Mr. Marks. Obviously, there's a big backlog. Are we gradually going to get some of these applications coming before us throughout the next month when they're all decided? And do you know what number of applications are outstanding?
Thank you, Councillor. That's a really good question. Juma is going to have to help me here, but we've got around, I think, 200 or so applications in total stuck in the backlog. No, we do not propose to bring all or possibly even most or some of those back to this committee. The reason why these are in front of the committee tonight is because the motions to grant permission were given by other planning committees. So we intend to deal with the majority of them under delegated authority by applying the steps contained in the interim air quality mitigation strategy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor John Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it may not surprise anyone of this committee to know that I had a fairly in-depth understanding of what was going on in terms of the air mitigation strategy. And Mr. Marks is quite correct. The key part in terms of what we're looking at is that it's not individual dwellings, but it's a development and all developments in conjunction. So that means that the assessment is done on the basis of everything that is there. There are, I would suggest, no way that we can actually think of progressing decisions on those that have already been resolved to grant permission, other than by doing the steps that are outlined in the recommendation. I understand Councillor Pond's concern, but to say that because they're in proximity to the forest means the mitigation strategy is not valid doesn't actually line up with what the mitigation strategy says. I believe we should be addressing these. By all means, if Councillor Pond chooses to change his recommendation and suggest that those particular two applications come back to the committee at the end of carrying out these actions, I might even be tempted to agree with him on that one, but I would like to see us being able to move these forward so we can actually do the required work to get to the point where we can make a final decision on them. As Mr. Marks has answered Councillor Morgan, we've got about 200 that are out there. We need to start moving these forward. We have an interim air mitigation strategy. Let's make use of it.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufmann.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If that's a proposal from Councillor Phillip, I wasn't sure if it was, the two that Councillor Pond has highlighted would come back to a committee, then I'm happy with that. There are concerns. I wouldn't want to make it go to full council or anything like that. These two are within 5 meters of the forest edge, and there's I think on one of them it would mean from 2 cars probably going to 10 cars perhaps, or whatever. They're big numbers, and we may be saying just a good check and balance, as I think our electorate would want us to, where we're dealing with such a sensitive issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think Councillor Phillip was actually proposing it. He was purely saying that Councillor Pond might want to propose that. So it's, but I think that was the case. Councillor Jeannie Lee.
Jim, I didn't want to take Councillor Pond's glory away from him.
Very, very little glory, Madam Chairman. But if that is a suggestion from Councillor Phillip, I would be very happy to abide by that. And with that proviso, we might avoid a vote, and we might avoid a reference to full council.
Right. Okay. Can we just hear from Councillor Jeannie Lee first, because she has had her hand up for a while, and then we'll.
Now I've learned to use this blue hand. Yes, I have to use it. I've got a question. Only at the meeting the other night, which John Phillip actually agreed with me, which is probably was a first. There's a price difference on this special air quality that the developer's got to pay if they're nearer the forest, but not so much then say if they're 4 or 5 miles away. I just needed that clarified. And this tonight, the idea is that the officers, we've already agreed these things at planned subcommittees, I'm assuming, and it's just so that the officer then, and then without having to bring it all the way back to us, can just carry on and put them straight forward. Is that right? I wanted it to be.
It is indeed. They've all been granted planning permission subject to mitigation. Okay.
And just to come back on the first point that the councillor raised about the different tariffs that are applied, the interim air pollution mitigation strategy does set out different tariffs for different types of developments, i.e., in terms of securing obviously the financial payments towards the mitigations, and that's set out clear in the IAPMS anyway. So I just thought I'd just address that first point that the councillor raised.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
And Chairman, if I could come back.
Could I just hear very quickly from Councillor Heap, because he has been very patiently waiting, and I think he hasn't spoken at all on this item. So, Councillor Heap.
Hasn't spoken on this item. Thank you. That's great. Well, some of these developments are within 5 meters of the forest. Now, when you turn on the car, if you're going to reverse into a space, do it when the engine's hot, because that saves CFCs, everything. So all of these things are going. A catalytic converter doesn't work until it gets 230 degrees centigrade. So any development that is bang next to the forest is going to be even worse for the environment than people driving through it. And everything that Councillor Pond has referred to is bang next to the forest. So we do need to listen to him on that one. Different tariffs? Well, yes, we should apply a different tariff. So if somebody's going to be living next to the forest, driving a diesel or a petrol engine, doesn't matter. They need to pay a higher tariff than somebody going through it because their catalytic converter will not be hot enough. So yes, we do need to consider these things. And both of these items that Councillor Pond has outlined need to be referred to another committee later on with better information.
And
I will support him in anything that he would intervene at this point.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Phillip.
Thank you. I wanted to come back first to say, no, I always listen to Councillor Lee. I don't always agree with Councillor Lee, but I always listen to her. She has a very strong route into Tesco's and Waltham Abbey and comes up with some very interesting things from there. I don't actually agree with quite a bit of what Councillor Heap said. We have to remember that we're a planning committee here. We're not judging the mitigation strategy itself, but I am happy, given what Councillor Pond says, if this helps us to move it forward, that we take the resolution with the recommendation that the officer already made to remove one of them for further work and request that the two items that Councillor Pond identified come back to us at DDMC at some point in the future where the rest of the activities have been carried out so that we can make a final view on those items.
Thank you. I've still got Councillor Heap, Councillor Phillip and Councillor Pond indicating, but I'm assuming they're historical. Okay, all right.
Chairman, no, I want to just make one point of clarification, if I may.
Of course.
These sites are actually more than 5 yards from the forest, but they are in very close proximity to it. But I wouldn't want you to. I didn't use that measurement, and I haven't measured them exactly, but they are very close.
Right. Okay, I think, councillors, we are at the stage then that we can confirm that the 48 Russell Road has been taken out of this list completely. And the proposal at the moment, proposed by Councillor Pond, and I think actually seconded by Councillor Heap, although also obviously supported by John Phillip, but I think it was actually officially seconded by Councillor Heap, is that we require EPF 028718 at 51 High Road and EPF 1257, which I think is on the last 125719, 132 Church Hill. Is that the correct one?
No, 113 Church Hill, madam.
Oh, I'm sorry. What's the reference then? I've got 1257 is 132 Church Hill.
In that case, I've written down the wrong
on the list.
Number.
I'm looking at page 82,
no,
Councillor
you're
Pond.
Absolutely right. I've written down the wrong number, but it is actually 113 Church Hill, which I'm desperately trying to find the number of.
Oh, in that case, that's 1471. It's the last one on the list. 113
right.
Church Hill, that's EPF 1471 stroke
of 19. I do beg your pardon.
So it's definitely 1471 stroke 19 at 113 Church Hill.
Yes, the other one I regard as de minimis.
Okay, so the two we're talking about is literally the first on the list and the last on the list.
How neat.
Yep. So members, I think we can progress this by first agreeing if we are happy for those. First of all, I want to just ask planners to comment if we are able to do this and ask for any mitigation to be brought back to this committee.
Yes, Madam Chair, Chairman, I don't see any problem with that. Obviously, for 48 Russell Road, I think the issue was that we couldn't obtain legal advice at such short notice, so that was the reason for that one. But with the other two, obviously the appropriate assessments and other legal and administrative tasks will be done, and we can then report back to members on that. So no problem with that.
Lovely. Okay, right. So in that case, members, is there anybody who, do I need to take a vote on that? Sorry, Gary, I'm turning to Gary for advice. Do I need to take a vote as to whether we can put those extra conditions in with those two, or can I just add it to the proposal?
Chairman, I would ask the committee if anyone objects to that, and I think we can safely assume silence is assent.
That sounds a perfect idea. Members, is anybody against those two coming back to this committee?
Alpha and Omega via 48. Good.
Okay, in that case, members, we just need to agree as per the recommendations on, I've lost my pages, I'm very sorry, bear with me 2 seconds. As per the recommendations on page 75, are we all agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
I think that was everybody. Certainly I didn't hear any dissent. In that case, that recommendation is agreed. Thank you. Okay, members, that in fact concludes, oh no, it doesn't quite conclude. I always forget the last little bit. Item 9 is any other business?
None, Chairman.
Thank you. And there is no item for the need to exclude public and press. In that
Correct,
case,
Chairman.
members, I would just like to add my thanks again to the officers involved in tonight's planning applications and their reports, and the time they've taken in the reports, and indeed fielding all the councillors' questions in detail. And with that, I'd like to close the meeting, please, at 20.